Welcome to Pick Up and Deliver, the podcast where I pick up my audio recorder as I step off the train and deliver an episode to you while I walk home. I'm Brendan Riley. Good afternoon, listeners. It's a lovely day here in suburban Chicago. I'm walking home from work in the mid-50s. It's almost warm enough I could take my stocking cap off, but I feel like if I do that, then I'm going to be cold. It's that weird edge case where it's just a little too cool to be warm, a little too warm to be cold. But that's okay. I'm comfortable. I'll adjust if I'm not. I'm pleased to be talking to you as I walk home. I am on my way home for the last time from work before Thanksgiving break, which starts tomorrow for me and goes through, of course, Sunday. Then I'll be back at work on Monday. I have a lot to do during that time because I'm behind on my grading and whatnot, but generally we're doing pretty well. Well, it's been a little while. I did 3 episodes talking about movies, so you've had all the movie content you need for a while. So it feels like you ought to get some game content. And what's my favorite kind of game content to deliver? That's right, short reviews of games I've only played once or twice. Well, maybe not my favorite, but I enjoy it. So there we are, shooting from the hip triple shot. Shooting from the hip triple shot is an episode format in which I give brief commentary on games that I've recently played for the first time or maybe first and second time. It's not an in-depth review segment because I haven't played the game enough to be able to review it, but it gives you a little taste of what I've been playing and lets me talk at some length about the games I've been enjoying. So that's what we're doing today. Oh, walking by a restaurant with some outdoor speakers. That's jaunty. I wonder if I'll get a copyright strike for having that music picked up in my podcast via ambiance. We'll see. If you can hear this, it didn't get a copyright strike. The first game that I want to talk about today is Beowulf The Legend. Now, this is a Reiner Knizia game from the early 2000s, published by Fantasy Flight, and I picked it up at Goodwill. It looks to be intact. I mean, as far as I can tell, it's got all the pieces and cards that you need, and it is well crafted and amusing. So, what is the deal with Beowulf? Beowulf is a competitive cooperative game, which is sort of a funny way to describe it. It's not actually cooperative in any way. You are always competing with the other players, but the premise is you are members of Beowulf's warrior clan, helping Beowulf on his journey through life, watching him engage in the various elements of exciting adventure that are part of the Beowulf legend. And you, as one of his lieutenants, are earning glory by helping in various ways. You can help by fighting, you can help by celebrating, you can help by giving gifts. There's a number of different things you can do, and that celebration becomes your points. So there's this really interesting back and forth in which you gain glory through helping him. So the way the game works, there is a Beowulf marker on the board, and there's a long track of events. And Beowulf moves forward, and then an event happens. And as individual players, you deal with the event in a number of different ways. There's one that's a sort of closed or blind bidding event where the person who bids the most gets a thing, but then everybody else doesn't spend what they bid. So there's a balancing act there. There are some other elements where you are trying to help Beowulf defeat monsters, and so you're playing fighting cards. And over the course of the game, you are slowly building up this score toward the idea of having the most points at the end. The aspect of it that's most interesting to me springs from the way the cards look and work. If you've played Reiner Knizia's 2001 Lord of the Rings game, which is a cooperative game, you have encountered similar kinds of test. So in Reiner Knizia's Lord of the Rings, each player has a series of cards that have icons in the corner indicating 1, 2, or 3 of a different resource. And as the party progresses, you have to spend these resources to defeat challenges. And if you fail to defeat the challenges, the group takes damage, and then eventually you lose and Sauron destroys the world. I've never won that. I guess maybe some people do win it occasionally, but I don't think you can. I'm kidding. Of course it's possible, but yikes. Beowulf feels a bit like Knizia had some feedback from some people who said, I like this game a lot, but I don't like having to share with other people to work together. Do you think you can make a version of this game where you don't work with other people? Instead, you go on your own? And Knizia said, can do, fella, can do. So in Beowulf, that's what's happening. It's the same thing. The group is moving through the area together, trying to solve problems, and but you're each individually contributing to solving the problem, and you get points based on how well you do so, or if you do so, or whatnot. All in all, it's a fine game. I mean, it's not amazing, but it was amusing, and I will play it once or twice more before I pass it along. I don't think it'll have a long stay in my collection, just because the gameplay is fine, but it's not better than a lot of games, and at this point, I really need to be removing games, not adding more, although, of course, I'm always trying to sate my desire to play new games. So in that regard, it worked. It also is great because it was, like I said, $2 at Goodwill or $3 at Goodwill, something like that. So I like the price. All right, that was Beowulf The Legend. The next game I'm going to talk about today is Smitten. Smitten is a 18-card micro game designed and published by Jamie Stegmaier with art by Vincent Dutray. Now, normally this game looked fine, but it is not necessarily a game I would really seek to cover or seek to get if it weren't part of a sale, which it was. So in Smitten was designed and distributed by Stegmaier as a kind of celebratory activity for the 10th anniversary of Stonemaier Games. As you know, Jamie Stegmaier is the primary designer as well as the head publisher, et cetera, of Stonemaier Games. And so in celebration of the 10th anniversary, they had a sale. I bought a few of the expansion packs for Rolling Realms and decided that when you do that, then they throw in a copy of Smitten for free. Now, it's just packaged in a sturdy envelope. It doesn't come with a wallet or anything else to hold the cards. Instead, it's just 18 cards and a rule sheet and the game. But the game itself is pretty dang good. So here's how you play. In Smitten, you and another player, you shuffle up the deck, discard one card, and draw 3. Your opponent draws 3 as well. And your goal is to play a grid of 9, or play 2 grids of 9 cards, which is 18 cards, onto the table. It's a cooperative game. And the way it works is each card is numbered 1 through 9 and takes a position 1 of 9 spots in the grid. So like the number 5 card always goes in the middle of the grid. The number 1 card is always in the upper left corner. And there are 2 copies of each card in the deck. So at the end of the game, you're going to have 2 grids that go 1 to 9, 1 to 9. The tricky part is each card has an instruction on it as well. Some of the instructions will say, reveal a card and play it in the other grid. Or place a card, reveal a card and place it doing this, or whatever. So there are a variety of rules about how one adds cards to the game. The trick is that when you play a card, you have to be able to play it next to a card that already exists. And then your opponent or your partner has to follow the instructions on the card you played. Most of the cards that played say you have to place a card. You still have to follow the adjacency rule, I believe, but that's the only rule you have to follow. You don't have to do the instruction on the card when you place it. So the whole point of the game is you're balancing, you're trying to, without sharing with each other which cards you have, because you only get 3 cards at a time, and you're drawing from the same shared deck. So without telling each other which cards you have, one of you says, hey, I think I can play now, and the other one says, okay. So you play, and then your partner has to play one of the cards out of their hand, following the direction, or place one of the cards out of their hand, following the direction of the card you played. And if they're unable to, you lose. I've played 3 rounds of this now so far. It's a cute little game, an excellent way to occupy 5 or 10 minutes if you have it. There's definitely some interesting deduction that goes on there as the game goes along. You can tell from the cards that aren't available which cards your partner probably has, or you can think about statistically which numbers they're likely to have as you're playing cards and hoping they're going to be able to play next to cards that are already there. The art, I can't remember what the picture is. It's a sort of mural that's divided up into 9 pieces. So when you play the cards, they together make a picture, but I don't remember what the picture is. Yeah, overall, Smitten is a fine game, a fine return to form for Jamie Stegmaier. An excellent example of a fun little game you can have for free. I always like that. And worth your time if you get a chance to play for a few minutes. I don't know if I would go out of my way to buy it, but I don't even know if they're selling it. I think the only way to get it is to buy something from them while they still have it in stock. I might be wrong about that, but I think that's what's going on. So that's Smitten from Stegmaier Games. Jamie Stegmaier from Stonemaier Games. I don't know. I don't have trouble with that usually in the abstract, but when I'm talking about both the designer and the company, I get those confused. Well, this is a shooting from the hip triple shot, but I've got a bonus discussion for you. I'm going to start doing this, I think, on the regular. When I do a triple shot, I'm also going to talk about one game that I've played recently that's out of the dust. And today I want to talk about Marrying Mr. Darcy. Marrying Mr. Darcy is a game I picked up on Kickstarter. I backed it twice, actually. I backed the main game, and then I backed the game that had the Zombie and Emma expansions. I got both of those. And it is a cute little thematic game based in the world of Jane Austen, particularly Pride and Prejudice. I believe the subtitle on the game is the Pride and Prejudice card game. In it, you play one of the Bennet sisters, although I think there are a couple other female characters you could be, trying to make the most beneficial match you can by increasing your wit and your beauty and a couple other characteristics while avoiding getting hit with negatives from your opponents. It's a very silly thematic game, very luck driven. It's basically, did you get a good card draw from the deck? In that way, it's not all that dissimilar from Flux. Flux is more random, and Flux has a much less coherent theme, i.e. no theme, although it is thematic if you get one of the branded versions of Flux. By contrast, Marrying Mr. Darcy is full of cute little pieces of inside baseball jokes, or inside jokes from various Austen works, as well as thematic touches that really engage with what's going on in the game. The end of the game is a bit grim. You have accumulated a certain level of prominence, and then one by one you roll to see if anyone proposes to you. When you get proposed to, they propose in order, and it's not always in the order of least. It's not always in the order you want. So if you get proposed to by a less desirable suitor, you have to decide, do I take his proposal and be done? Or do I reject his proposal, in which case he's not interested anymore? And then if no one proposes later, you end up as an old maid, and that's the biggest losing condition. So when I played this game originally, I thought it was fine, but far too luck driven and not engaging enough with interesting choices to make it worth playing much again, which is clear by the fact that it was 6 years, 8 months, and 15 days until I played it again. And when I did, it was at the offer of a friend who brought it to my gaming group and said, hey, I want to play this. Do you want to play it? And I was looking for a game, so I said, sure. So all of that is to say, not really a game that I'm looking to keep. In fact, a game I'm going to get rid of. One of the friends at the game club who expressed that they really liked the game. And I said, well, you can have my copy. So I'm going to bring it tonight and give it to them. And then I have one less game on my shelf. Hoo-yah! It does mean I'm going to not end up playing the Zombies, the Pride and Prejudice Zombies expansion, or the Emma expansion, because I never got around to playing those, but c'est la vie. So that's Marrying Mr. Darcy. I did not take the opportunity to look up who created that game, but I will tell you, it was probably Erica Savano, and the artist was Eric Evanson. That was a self-published game from Evanson Creative. All right, the last game I'm going to talk about today is a delightful game called How I Survived game. Now, this is one of those games that somebody picks up from like a gift store in a rural town. In this case, my in-laws were in Vermont, I believe, or Connecticut, to do some leaf peeping and attend some plays. And while they were there, they got souvenirs for us. And they picked up for my son this game called the How I Survived game. This game is so off the radar that when I went to log it, I discovered it was not in Board Game Geek. I had to actively go add it to Board Game Geek, which I have done. If you go look at the show notes, you'll find the link, or if you go to Board Game Geek and search for the How I Survived game, you will find it there. The reason I went out of my way to add it is that it is actually published by a company. I can't remember the name of it. There's no author to the game attributed, but it's published by a company that publishes some significant games. So it's not their most significant game is Wordle, which is that's no slouch, Wordle. That's a serious game that has a lot of sales. So from that perspective, it's really compelling that this game is available to them. But here's how it works. So they're in the middle of the table. There are a couple dozen, maybe 50 cardboard tiles that have little pictures on them of various things like sunglasses or a tent or roller skates or an umbrella. And on the back, there's something else, a roll of toilet paper, some pills, a math book. And these are scattered all over the table. And it's a judge game. So it's a pitching and judge game. So you have an individual who is the judge, and they read the card, and it'll say something like, how do you survive an attack by an angry llama? And then everybody gets about 30 seconds to grab 3 tiles. Each player grabs 3 tiles. And then we go around the team and you pitch to the judge how you're going to survive that attack using the 3 objects that you've picked up. This was a creative and very entertaining game, really silly. There's nothing to it as far as being a game. It is very, very light. And the heart of the enjoyment comes from the mix of these tiles and the questions that were asked to prompt your answers. So between those 2 things, we have an amusing time, well worth the half an hour. We've played it twice now, and both times we had a good time. It is a silly judging game, but a lot of silly judging games are pretty fun, and this is one of those. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it over Snake Oil or Super Fight, but we had a good time, and I think if someone brought it and said, hey, I want to play this, you wouldn't be harmed by taking a little time and playing it. So that's my thoughts on the How I Survived game. And that's also my thoughts about the end of the week. Or the end of the episode. I am home. I'm standing outside my door, which means it's time for me to go. I want to say thanks for joining me on my walk today. I hope that your next walk is as pleasant as mine was. Bye-bye.
Brought to you by Rattlebox Games.